Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast, a show for accountants using technology to make their jobs more strategic and impactful. I'm Blake Oliver.
And I'm David Leary.
Our special guest for this bonus episode is Guy Pearson, CEO at Practice Ignition, where his team develops software that turns your proposal, terms of service, and payment collection into a single smart contract. Guy, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
It's great to be here with you both. And Blake, it was great to meet you in person a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, I followed you for years, and I think that was the first time, right? Was you were in LA, and we met up for breakfast at some like divey cafe.
It was perfect though. They had good coffee, and we watched the World Cup. It was great.
That was great. Well, you watched the World Cup. I don't know anything about soccer, so I didn't.
This isn't football.
But it was great. It was good because you were entertained. Like you had something to distract you when I was being really boring. So it was very appropriate.
Wow. What a start.
So, Guy, I have a question for you. I know that you studied accounting, which is great because it's always nice when somebody's developing software for accountants who actually was an accountant. And, I was reading up on you and I found out you started really young. You were, interning basically while you were in school, which is apparently a very common thing in Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were offered a partnership at the ripe age of 24, but you turned it down. What the hell were you thinking?
It does sound a little bit crazy when you read it all back like that. But there's a couple of things. So the firm that I was offered partnership with was going into a listed group, which meant that you sort of would not be in control of your own destiny. The second thing is that it was what they call a full service firm here in Australia. So that means that there's loans, financial planning, leasing, all under the one roof. Or a one-stop shop, which is a perfectly fine business model, but I was interested in businesses and business growth. And the third reason was seeing all the cloud technology coming along and thinking about the next generation of entrepreneurs. So, Xero kind of just crept out of the ground, being in our next door neighbor, New Zealand. So seeing that come along, as well as things like revolutionary tools like Skype. Allowing digital meetings to take place sort of face to face. And all this was sort of coming about. And so I basically decided to take the leap and not take up the partnership. And instead I went traveling for a year and spent all my money. the anti-accountant thing to do.
Exactly. Which is a very common thing in your part of the world, is to take a year off between,
usually it's career break or post-study or before you start college or whatever it is, but at some point sort of go and see the world.
I think that's great. I wish more of Americans did that. I had the privilege of traveling for about 6 weeks after I finished my studies, and that was world-changing. I can't imagine what it would be like spending a whole year.
Well, I'm going to send all my kids to live with the guy for a year in Australia. So I have a plan for this.
Now, sadly, I don't own a McMansion like you do down in Tucson, mate. So they may be sleeping on couches and chairs. So sadly,
you can put them to work. Put them to work for sure.
Wow. So
I think I saw a picture. So you ran out of money, right? You spent all your money, yep. And then you decided you're going to open an accounting firm. Is that the jump, or did you do something before?
So I was working in an accounting firm, went traveling, and just before I went traveling, I'd finished my CPA equivalent, or my chartered accountancy here in Australia, and I'd started working at a brewery at night called Four Pines, which has done very well, one of the first craft breweries here in Oz. And basically when I came back home, I started working there again to keep the lights on at home whilst I endeavored on my jeans and T-shirt wearing cloud accountant journey in the end of 2009.
And then you decided you were going to start a practice and you just ran it out of your house?
Yeah, I ran out of my house that I lived in. So in a suburb called Freshwater in Sydney. And, like I said, we were trying to do everything cloud-based. Still had to buy a server for the tax software here in Australia. That had to run on the terminal server, but pretty much everything else was laptop, second screen, and cloud-based. So Google Apps, I think Workflow Max back in the day. Back then it was also Xero, and then basically all the tax and compliance was still done submission via, let's call it, I don't want to call it dial up, but it still made some interesting sounds during the lodgement, the segment on there when you hit the lodge button for a tax return.
And that was that interactive accounting?
Yeah, so that's interactive accounting. So started the company and sort of had the brand before I left it to go overseas. And then that was sort of waiting when I came back to sort of get all the formal qualifications, certificate of public practice, all the things I needed to do to be able to be a CPA trading in your language, or a chartered accountant trading in mine.
I think when I saw you give a talk in Sydney, I was impressed. At one hand, obviously you kind of were cloud focused early on. You made that decision, cloud. I'll take clients on anywhere. I can be remote. I'm going to do Skype, like you said, et cetera. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is that from day one, you set up this mission to build your firm as a scalable business.
Yeah.
Right. Which a lot of people, like, they work at the firm for years. They realize, okay, everything's broken. Nothing's working. I got to figure out how to scale this. Right. And they have to retrain themselves. But you from day one set out to build a scalable firm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the slide that you saw me talking about was it's chess, not checkers, which was a quote from training day. I'm not going to say the full quote because it has some profanities in it. I don't want to have too many bleeps on the podcast. But basically, I planned as if we were going to win. So if we were going to win, I would spend money up front and think about how the business model would work. So I wanted everything to be connected, and I didn't like manually doing anything. I'd much prefer to try and fix the problem or plug the problem with some layer of tech. And this is, once again, going back to 2010, so a very long time ago. And we had connected apps out the wazoo using OneSAS, API, sort of all those sort of data connecting tools to try and make sure that the system would flow as much as possible. So if we were going to be an accounting firm for, let's say 500 clients, and we wanted to do that in a reasonable time frame, or perhaps a quick time frame, depending on how you look at it. If you're operating for 3 years, that means onboarding 3 clients a week, right? Which in accounting terms is insane level of growth. Not for software, but trying to get them all onboarded successfully, get them deployed, get them up to speed, deal with their past compliance. Like, how are we going to deal with all this? So we built onboarding forms, welcome emails. Here's what it's like working at Interactive. This is what we're going to help you. We tried to automate back then proposals. We used Socket app, which is based up in Canada. We tried to payments. We tried to automate that. We had it on our website. We had online direct debit engine that we hooked up using concatenate out of Google Sheets, if you know what that means, to generate a URL. So it'd be a branded, predetermined, pre-filed payment page. Like, all these things we built with, let's call it, what do you call it? It's almost like, in Australia we say is one way to fix everything, and it's apply more duct tape. Basically, like, everything can be fixed with more duct tape. So basically we duct taped all these solutions together to make sure that we had a scalable onboarding.
Yeah, I think that's a universal principle.
Okay, perfect. So, if you can't fix it with duct tape, you use more duct tape.
And was it all just technology, or did you just with lots of rigor around documenting processes?
We did that,
so that way you could take yourself out of the decision.
Yeah, so like getting the processes in place is one thing, but trying to make yourself obsolete is the second. If you want to be let's call it successful business owner rather than an operator who has all the key knowledge, you want to make sure that the team itself is scalable. So we had Confluence back in the day, which is an Atlassian product. The firm has now since moved to Google Sites to be connected in with the Google App Suite. But basically it's, the old school intranet, basically, but an online version where you have visuals, you can have documents, videos, all those sorts of things. So we were working on that so that if I was to depart, which was the aim, from the day-to-day, that everyone else knew how to do everything.
So you set out from the beginning to build a firm that could scale and could live without you. How long did it take you to get to the point where you could leave and then start Practice Ignition?
I was out of the company 3.5 years after starting it. And I would say I stopped filing anything to do with compliance about 18 months in. I hired a CFO and a head of tax. And so they took over all the clients between them, and then we hired in underneath them. So it's basically how the scaling up happened. And then probably I went to work on the business for a year after that. So that takes us up to 2.5 years. And then I scaled back to part-time as Practice Ignition kicked off, which was in concept in 2012. And then by July 2013, I resigned as an employee. And then Dave, if you remember the talk in Sydney, there was an inflection point in the growth of the firm. Couple of things happened. One, we started getting referrals because we were now trusted. And the second thing that happened is that I was no longer there as a bottleneck in the process. So the rest of my team, my partners, could sell and sell our services, upsell clients. It wasn't just all resting on my shoulders being one person.
And then are you still involved in the firm?
Yeah. So I still own a fairly big chunk of the firm today. I'm still the chairman and director. still hold a tax agent's license and all these other acronyms that are way too boring to run through. Still day to day, my job now is team culture, forward-looking strategy, and we're just about to sort of refocus and rekindle where we're heading in the next couple of months, which is pretty exciting.
So are you guys, your firm, Interactive Accounting, are they doing timesheets and billing out hours, or is it fixed fee, value-based type pricing? Like how do you guys package your services?
So we've had our prices listed on our website, which I know is a bit of a taboo subject from day one. The reason being is it acted as a really good filter. So we did rather a good job with marketing, and we positioned ourselves where we would get lots of, let's call it, inbound leads. So part of the video, part of the reason for something like Practice Ignition, coming out of being, what I did at the firm being a genesis for it, was trying to streamline that whole process. And the pricing acted as another filter. You can have someone who tells you they're going to build the next Apple, and you're like, that's fantastic. This is amazing. I'm so excited to work with you. You send a proposal for $2,000 for the year and they balk at it. Clearly, they don't really actually have that mindset of building the next Apple. Nor are they anywhere on their path to doing so. So we use it as a filter.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to stop and thank you for putting your pricing on your website, because I was able to, many years ago, look at your website and copy you in building my own small firm. So it did have that perk.
You're welcome, benefit. Mate. It's very funny. We found a few websites over the years that were almost not only cut and pasted the pricing page, we found a few that were borrowed the design, borrowed the wording on the About Us page and just put their firm's name in, like all kinds of fun things. But, being copied is a great form of flattery. And, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So we were a bit cagey about things in the early days when it came to all that sort of thing. And then as it went on, it's like, well, if they can do what we can do, there's only, we can't have 10,000 clients tomorrow. Like our firm would break. So there's plenty for everybody. The price, so fixed fee and value-based pricing has always kind of been our mandate. We tend to find that whenever we get in time costs, we end up in a mess. So we typically, if there was a time cost sort of scenario, we agree on a minimum monthly spend for the period of the engagement. And then there's, set deliverables, and then there's things that are outside it. They might be charged on time cost, but we always try and provide an estimate. So the one thing, the firm didn't want to do was end up in a mess. One particular partner over the years perhaps did time cost stuff, and it got us into a real doozy of a mess. And ironically, did not use Practice Ignition. So, there's plenty of case studies on people who don't use it and get into that sort of mess. And then when they start using it, it cleans up. WIP lockup is no longer a problem. They don't have debtor balances and don't have write-offs. It's just a whole bunch of plus sides. But enough of a product plug.
I probably should ask this before we got into talking about all this, but so that our listeners understand something about your firm, like what is the size of it? How many customers do you have, or clients? How many staff?
So
how
there's
many partners?
2 partners currently. We have, including myself, so it's basically one managing partner and me as another owner. We have a leadership team underneath, so head of each sort of division, and then a general manager as well. There's about 20 staff. Based in Sydney and Melbourne in Australia, and we look after about 1,000 sort of core business clients, mostly in the B2B SaaS, so companies like a Practice Ignition. And we look after global marketplace businesses and venture capital firms, private equity funds. They're typically like our niche these days, but historically we look after businesses that want to grow really fast and need their accountant to be able to run with them and be flexible and go from everything from bookkeeping, management, accounting, tax, advisory, grants, scale up until they do their first internal hire, being a CFO or whatnot, and then pare back, and just be their growth partner as they go along. So it works pretty well for us. The team is amazing, right? So we can talk about my success, but I haven't been there in the day-to-day for 5 years. So they've done an amazing job to grow a firm, and even with challenges that people and people management bring, there's just a good solid group of people there and an amazing client base.
Obviously now you have Practice Ignition. And so does that actually spin off hey, we wrote some code in the accounting firm and then you took that out and spun it off? Or was this kind of just like, it's an idea, I'm going to go chase it separately now that I'm kind of stepped back from the accounting firm? Like, how did you go from, hey, I have an accounting firm, now I got a software company?
A couple of things that played into it. So number one, I became an accountant because I wanted to help small businesses get better access to info faster and make better decisions. That basically resulted in me becoming an accountant. Worked at firms, learned the ropes, dealt with all entities, big, small, profit, not-for-profit, charities, large family groups, all that sort of stuff. So I built sort of my cred and then on how to run a firm as well before I left the last firm I was at. And then coming into interactive accounting was very much like, my firm is never going to be, it's not going to be Deloitte or PwC or any of those. It's going to look after a set group of clients that will grow to a certain size. But there's this whole other part of the market out there being the second part, given my original goal of helping as many businesses as possible. And so from my mind, what you see in Practice Ignition right now is still kind of generation one. So it's designed to be the source of truth for how you run your firm. So you understand who your clients are, what they pay you for, and dig into the data. That's one side. The second side is to help you run a more efficient firm with the hope that you spend more time with your clients and help them out more. The second part of it was me looking for the most efficient way to run an accounting firm, because running my accounting firm, doing monthly direct debits in the systems we had here, even though they were quite good, there was still a huge manual process. So, doing 500 monthly direct debits or credit cards or ACHs, depending on your country, it was an absolute disaster when all you get was a PDF at the end of the month saying who failed, who's invalid routing numbers, whatever it was, and then having to go back through and manually chase them, manually reconcile your accounts. Like, it was just a disaster. And we were moving from one bill for a year to 12. So imagine dealing with failed payments times 12. It just absolute disaster. And nothing was tied to the contract. So that was kind of the problem I wanted to fix for the firm. My ultimate goal of turning PI into this engine that allows you to run a better firm and spend more time with clients is sort of built phase one. So source of truth, what comes next is kind of interesting and probably shouldn't make any product promises, but effectively, if you look at any other system that has...
We don't get anything? We don't get anything?
Well, if you look at any other system that has a source of truth, so let's say Intercom is a very good example, is a source of truth for software companies. What do they do with that information? They use it to communicate better with their customers or clients. And so that's just a little teaser. So that's ultimately where we want to go, because I really want to work and have the tool to be able to help provide a better relationship so that accountants have more trust for their clients. Clients ask their accountants more things, which leads to more work in the forward-looking aspect, so advisory and data tearing apart, and building it back up into a model and making decisions. That's what I'm interested in trying to help achieve. But to do that, your client needs to love their CPA, which is, if you went out on the street right now, either in Tucson or LA, and you ask someone whether or not they love their CPA, the first person you saw, they probably either A, don't remember who did their taxes last year, or B, they hate seeing them unless they're getting a tax refund. So I want to change that.
A noble and worthy pursuit.
So look, PI came about off the back of, kind of continuation of original goal, and then selfishly trying to help an accounting firm run as efficiently as possible. Efficiency
is really important. One of the issues facing CPAs in America or facing accounting firm owners in America is it's getting harder and harder to find talent, to keep CPAs on staff, to recruit them, to retain them. As the economy has improved, and we just hit 4% growth here in the second quarter. It's debatable whether or not that'll keep going, but it's been picking up, and all the evidence, all the projections show that there's going to be a shortage of highly skilled labor in the future, which will definitely affect accounting. So my question to you, Guy, is, how do accountants in the US and in Australia, everywhere around the world, how do we deal with this talent crisis? And there's one stat in particular that just really stuck out to me, which is why I'm asking you this question, which is a report from Korn Ferry predicting that by 2030 in Australia, firms are going to be paying an extra $28,600 per head for highly skilled labor. So that's 12 years, that's the wage premium over inflation. how are you guys going to survive?
Well, I think it's already starting to happen. I'm not sure that. So there's two ways to fix that problem. Number one is to put it offshore into a cheaper cost base, which I'm kind of against for a permanent solution. So I don't mind if people do it they can't find anyone here and they need two people like yesterday to deal with clients and need work done. But when it's a permanent one, it's a bad idea because you're not actually fixing the problem of delivery. So you've already seen the advances in software. Let's just say that think about all the things you've seen in the last 5 years and then compare that to the last 18 months. Like it's accelerating like crazy. So although the wage premium on let's call it really valuable skilled labor may go up, I don't think you'll see as many people working at accounting firms, to put it bluntly. I think what will happen is anything around processing, doesn't matter what it is, will cease to exist. It'll be very, very small, and everything else will be driven by systems. So premium may go up, fees will probably stay around about the same, but you shouldn't have as many costs in terms of labor or resources in terms of labor on your team. And that would be my bold guess with all the AI advancements on data collection, analyzing data, projections, all those things. Like everything that we've got right now makes a firm incredibly efficient. You can run an insanely profitable firm using technology today. I don't see that changing as technology gets better.
How much more profitable would you say?
So I remember anecdotally, firms that I know quite well used to be excited about a 20% profit margin. And I know for a fact that anecdotally, that a lot of the really good cloud firms run at 40%. So if we were to continue that stat, I would say it would go up to 50%. Now, the hard part is changing to all the systems obviously costs money and time. And so the one thing accountants are bad at is thinking about the long term, that whole chess line I gave before, and copying it up front, if you like wearing it on the chin would be an Australian expression.
But you would think that accountants of all people would be able to run the numbers and figure out, this is a worthwhile investment of my time.
I'm not sure what the saying is in the US. In Australia, it's a builder's house is never finished. There's always a renovation in progress. And to quote a few banks here recently, and I think it's the same overseas, spitting with Citibank, is that the hardest person to get a forecast on their business from is an accountant, because there's always client work that comes in before their own business, and they don't spend as much time on their own business.
Yeah, and I think that's a lesson. I mean, you've talked about and through over and over again. That's a theme here. Is like you have to figure out how to stop being in your business and start running your business, right? Because the only way you're going to make your business have 40% profitability is you have to stop doing the work, so you can figure out how to make it profitable. So,
to quote a very sort of crass godfather of mine, basically you make money off the backs of others. Now that sounds, brutal. But ultimately, if you have a team and you're achieving things together, two heads is greater than one, 10 is greater than two. If everyone's running in the same direction together and it's not all relying on you, you can make a lot more money. I mean, that's how business always works. You need to have the right people and do it efficiently, but that's the way it goes. And I'm going to circle back to one of your questions before, David. So you asked about me and building the tech company, having been an accountant. And when my CFO and the head of tax came on board, so Gareth and Lisa, it was known to them on day one that I was going to go and try to build a software company. And so the whole notion of me taking myself out of the business to help it run better for a year and then slowly stepping out over the following year was all kind of planned. Not written down in concrete, but that was known. And so I actually kicked off 3 projects before Practice Ignition. So one was, instead of doing an MBA, one was a systems, what do we call it now, systems integrator business that ended up going into my accounting firm and then was shut down once we pivoted towards B2B SaaS companies who didn't need our help with systems. And then the last one was, it's kind of almost what HubDoc does, the irony, but it basically is designed to go upload your bank statement and take out all the data and spew it out into a CSV or OFX or whatever format you needed to upload into your accounting ledger. Because once you turn bank feeds on, you have the data from today onwards, But going back to your banks, a lot of them would only give you maybe an Excel download for 3 months. And if you were typically doing this like 9 months after the financial year end or a year later, you had that missing gap that you don't want to manually code into your ledger system. So we used to basically focus on that. But we had a disagreement with one of the other founders and we shut the company down after sort of getting to market. So, and then there was Practice Ignition. So I had a very busy, let's call it 25 to 29 roughly in age, sort of doing all those things. But when we made the jump, Practice Ignition felt like the right one to back. Definitely the biggest one in terms of opportunity, but also the biggest problem to solve and the biggest benefit, I think, for accounting and the ecosystem and small businesses.
You turned me onto a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. When did you discover that? Like, before you started any of these businesses, like 3 years in?
No, it's 2-3 years ago. I have a really close mate who runs a software startup here in Australia, but he was head of Agile for Atlassian and head of Agile at Twitter. So based in San Fran for a while. And his name is Ben Horowitz, who wrote the book, and he's one of the partners of Mark Andreessen and him have a venture capital firm together called it's short, their web URL is No.
Oh, so he's just your friend?
My mate who works at Atlassian and Twitter pointed me onto the book. And it was
somebody else. Okay.
At the time, like
now I have
everyone maintained the whole startup thing as being a very rosy experience. I can tell you there have been times I've been sitting on the ground crying to my mum and my brother, and I'm not a big crier, about how the hell am I going to make all this work and keep everything together whilst we figure out the growth angles and everything else. And so, it was during sort of one of those times I was chatting with my best mate / one of my mentors, Nick, and he pinged me over the link to the book, just like, I think you should read this. And I read it shortly thereafter and just found an amazing amount of solace in almost like the reality that no matter what you read on, Medium or any of the other posts or LinkedIn about the success of a company, how great it is, that there are ups and downs for everyone's journey. And so he ended up with a listed company, then was acquired off the NASDAQ. But that was after sort of like 13 years of toil and turmoil, ups and downs, firing half the team in an afternoon, a multi-100-person company, all this stuff that kind of resonated, and obviously on a much larger scale than what I was dealing with, but it just kind of really hit home. And I think, with the session that I saw you at, Dave, in Sydney was all about start, grow, merge, sell, of the sort of life cycle stages of building and growing an accounting firm, but with reference to the hard thing about hard things, because you were there, we talked about war stories, all the things that you can stuff up along the way, to own failure, and celebrate the wins, basically. And so it's, for me, it was just kind of like the anti-business book. So given I like to swing from the fences a little bit and sort of typically run in a different direction to everyone else, it really hit home for me.
Yeah, I think it almost feels like it is a book. It's like a manual, like how do I make this decision about firing this person, right? Or how do I make a decision about this? I have to lay off some people, like all those tough decisions. It's almost like a manual on like the thought process on how you should attack that. So it listens like a great storybook.
Yeah.
It's actually amazing, but it's really like a manual. I found it really amazing. The other thing I thought was interesting was it's geared obviously towards an entrepreneur or founder.
Yep.
But after listening to it, I was like, God, if I would have listened to this early in my career, I would have been a different kind of an employee. I'm probably too stuck in my ways now, but like I would have actually, it's really interesting to take it in that way. I think anybody listening, you should definitely, it's worth getting. It's great. And if you get the audiobook, you hear him rapping, which is even better.
Well, we're coming up toward the end of our show, and Guy, I wanted to give you the opportunity to describe, give us the elevator pitch for Practice Ignition, if you've got the energy after sitting in a bunch of meetings today, and probably doing that for 5 years now, right? But tell for our listeners who have no idea what it is, right? I mean, I've been using Practice Ignition for years now. I love it. Couldn't live without it. What is it, and how can people find you online?
Perfect. So you can go to practiceignition.com or @Ignition app if you're on Twitter. follow us and sort of stay up to date with what's happening. And the basic bio of the company is designed to help you run the smartest professional services firm. We target CPAs and bookkeeping firms or pro-advisors. And the idea is that it lets you run your services company much like it's a software company. So, you can drag and drop your list of services, customize them, and send out online smart proposals to your clients. They can put in their ACH or credit card details, digitally sign without having to pay for an additional signing tool. And that can then integrate into whatever workflow tool that you're using, whatever invoicing tool that you're using, so QBO or Xero. And we go and collect the funds from your clients, reconcile your accounts receivable, and give you some amazing data that you typically don't get anywhere else. So what is your projected revenue for the year, conversion rates, what services drive your revenue, and really help you dive into running a better firm and actually understanding the services that you provide for your clients so that you can offer them a better experience and hopefully reduce your admin time so that you can actually focus on helping them solve their business problems and giving them a better life as well.
And David, if folks want to talk to us, tell us what we should talk about on the podcast, send us a story, where can they reach you?
Best way to reach me is on Twitter. I'm at David Leary. And how should they reach you, Blake?
I'm at Blake T. Oliver. Guy, thanks so much for your time today. It was great chatting with you. David, I will see you tomorrow. We're going to do another episode. So we'll catch up on the latest news.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Guy.
Cheers. Little story I wanted to share was about some interesting startup ideas that get thrown across my desk from time to time. So on the side, I'm an angel investor. I was one of HubDoc shareholders, so I'm very happy with the sale as a side note. But the best startup idea I've seen is all about the sharing economy and making greater utilization of something that we need and use every day. And the company was called Bin Share. The idea being that you share and rent/sell the spare space in your bin before the garbage collection comes.
Oh, you mean like your trash can?
Yeah. And I mean, like, yeah. This company was going to revamp and revitalize waste collection. And I'm wondering what neighbor would rent space on a regular basis off their other neighbor, right?
Wait, because I don't know what it's like where you are, but here, if I need more trash cans, I can just order them from Waste Management.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same here, but I guess it's for that flex capacity. I don't know. When you're only going to go over for 1 week. Heaven forbid that bin was a kilometer or a mile away and you had to drive it over. But it was just...
you invested right away, right?
Oh, 100%. It literally made its way. It was just before we had our Internal Practice Ignition conference in Sydney a couple of years ago, and the whole team pitched like these new product ideas. And every instance of, the demo screenshots for what the company or the client was inside Practice Ignition was bin share, something. Or, and a name of a client had some reference to waste in it. Like it went through the whole company like wildfire. It was absolutely hilarious. Needless to say, I dumped every single cent I had in there and haven't seen it since. I think it's sitting in someone else's trash can. But, it just kind of made my day. I was trying to figure out even the commercial applications. Maybe it was a business problem that they were solving for businesses. But seriously, there's some weird and wonderful, wacky things. The thing that I love the most is that someone had the balls to put together a pitch deck and go in all in to present this as one of the biggest companies of the future.
It's amazing. Thank you for that.